right, back to the topic. Okay, good morning, everyone. We're learning Torah, or yesterday, the day before, we learned about what is Rachel and Leah. And we said that these are spiritual levels of revelation of God that Yaakov wanted to reveal. Yaakov is the Jewish people. Rachel is revealed miracles in the world. Revealed miracles in the world, or godliness in the world in a more revealed way. If we want to call it the speech and the thought, the speech and the deed, action of God. And Leah, on the other hand, it represents if you want to call it the thought of God, concealed levels, deeper levels of godliness. In the time when there was the Holy Temple, as Rachel was revealed, and that's what Yaakov really wants, is that godliness should be revealed in the world. But really, Leah was also revealed because there was all these high levels of godliness that were accessible, but people didn't access them because there was so much godliness revealed that no one paid attention to them, which is not the case nowadays in the time of exile, when there's no Holy Temple, so we can have big holy tzaddikim like the Arizal and things that can have these tremendous perceptions of levels of godliness, tremendously high levels of godliness that there are in the that he wrote down in his books, that in a way were much higher than any of the rabbis, even in the Talmud, could express. Because so that's what's called God's thought. That's the aspect of Leah. But nevertheless, Yaakov wanted to reveal Rochel. So let's go. I am Mishkatu. Okay, so that's the whole idea. This is a footnote by the second Rebbe of Chabad, third Rebbe of Chabad, that's somewhat tzedek. That's the whole idea of Tova ha'oretz ma'od ma'od. This is the same topic, we talked about this before, as the this is the same idea as the Jews when they left Egypt. They wanted to stay in the desert because the desert was like God's thought. They didn't have to deal with the physical world. And Moses said, no, you have to go into the land of Israel because they're the commandments. And they said, good, commandments, but it's very difficult there in the land of Israel. They have all sorts of tests and enemies and difficulties and trials. And sometimes we're going to have to plow the land, and sometimes crops will grow, and sometimes we're in the desert, we're eating manna all the time. We're living from miracles. That's great, right? In the desert. He said, no, in the desert, that's not what God wants. That's like the level of God's thought. That's like Leah. We want miracles in this physical world. That's what it means. Tova oretz ma'od ma'od. God, Moses said to the Jewish people, the land of Israel is very, very good. To come into the physical world, that's what God wants. That's the whole idea of the generation of the desert. They were from the level of Leah, the world of thought. And they said, why should we go down into this physical world, which is Kabbalistically, that's the aspect of Malchut, the lowest aspect of God, this lower world, the Kayama mitzvahs, to do physical commandments in speech and deed. Haloza Efshar, it's good, sufficient to do in the desert. Also Torah and mitzvahs spiritually. Spiritually we'll be in the desert, and we can be attached to God. We don't have to deal with the physical world. What about all the laws about taking tithes from your food? What about physical things, putting on tefillin? It says you have to going to the land of Israel, right? Why don't you have the physical? He says, well, we'll do all that spiritually. We'll do it all spiritually. It's possible to do. Where did the Torah mitzvahs come from? They come from God. So we'll just do the way they are in God's mind. I know you did machshava, like thought. But really, it was a big mistake. The spies, the Meraglim, that generation that didn't want to come to the land of Israel, there was a big mistake. By means of speech and deed, specifically, Nimshach is drawn down, revealed godliness, biyoter, said even more. The ain case without any end. Because notes because really, sofo, the end is in the beginning. What did God want? I'm sorry, when he created the world, he wanted that we should be in the world, not that we should get out of the world. He wanted that we should transform this world, not to realize that this world is very low, very deceptive. It is, but to change that lowness into highness, to change that deception into perception, that we could be able to perceive godliness. That's what God wanted. That's why He put us here. And Moses, that's why he prayed 515 prayers. The Knesset Lord, he wanted to come to the land of Israel. So being in the physical world, that's the main thing. That's why it says that Yaakov loved Rochel, who was a revelation of God in the physical world, more than Leah, which is deep spiritual ideas of God. That's what Yaakov loved Rachel specifically. This is the idea of speech and action. Kisanua Leah, it says that Leah was hated. What does it mean, hated? The same way that Moses rejected the claim of the generation of the desert, that they wanted to stay in the desert. That's the opposite of the intention of God. That's like the generation of the like we said, the people in the desert. They wanted to stay there. Oh no, but we have to understand what it says. What is it? What did Leah say? That now my husband will accompany me. After she gave birth to Levi, she said, now I have given birth to the majority of the, she saw that that she was going to have, there were going to be 4 contributors to the Jewish people, she and Rachel, and the 2 handmaids, Bilhah and Zilpah. And she saw that each one of them would probably give birth to 3 children, so that there would be 12 tribes. She saw there was going to be 12 tribes. There was going to be 4 wives. Yaakov was going to have 4 wives, and each one will have 3 children. Each one will have an equal part. As soon as she gave birth to Levi, she had 4 children. She thought, oh, now she'll see. God, Yaakov will see that I have given more than my share of children. And end up she had 6. And Ishi, Alai Davka. She said, no, Yaakov is going to be with me. What did Leah say? That now my husband is going to be with me. What does it mean? That Yaakov is going to suffice with just thought of God, these spiritual deep levels, which is the level of Leah, right? And he'll reject Rachel not to be in the world. That was the mistake that the spies made. So what did she say? Now my husband will love me after she gave birth to Levi. He's going to be with me. He's going to be with me. What would we possibly think that Yaakov would favor Leah, who we said is the aspect of God's thought, these deep secrets, more than Rachel, which is revealing God in Torah and commandments? That's the mistake that the people in the desert made when they didn't want to come to the land of Israel. Yaakov also would make that. No, it's like this. The fact is, you have to have both levels. Doing Torah and the commandments with speech and action is wonderful, but there has to be also the intention. The ha below ha, because action and speech without thought, without the proper intention, lo sagi, it's not good. It's not sufficient. That's also the idea of Leviathan and Shor HaBor. It says in the future that there's going to be this battle between Leviathan, this big fish, and this big ox. Well, Leviathan, that refers to the, like fish, they're under the water. That's the big secrets of the Torah. And Shor HaBor, that's referring to the action. Shu Gamkin, this is these 2 levels. Leviathan, that's hiskashus, that's deep attachment to God, total surrender, like the fish in the sea. Como apam yilaveh, like Levi, joining to God. That's Leah. Leah, he wanted that should be the main thing. Al yadei bechinazu, by means of this, like it says bechasidim arishonim, like there's a Mishnah in Brachot. It says that the early Hasidim, that they used to pray 9 hours every day. Shu be'inyan bittul iskashu sanal l'machshava. We see that their main the occupation was in thought. 9 hours a day praying. I mean, what about working? What about learning Torah? What about doing the commandments? What about repeating, going over the ideas of Torah, learning Torah? What about doing the commandments? It says what? Because that they were Hasidim. And so it says that therefore everything that they did or that they said had tremendous blessing in it. So they could get a tremendous amount accomplished in thought, I mean in speech and in deed, because they spent so much time clinging to God. Something we learned before about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, that he was hiding away from the Romans, and he couldn't do commandments like eating matzah and everything. He had to hide away in the mountains, so he was completely had no contact with humanity. He ate fruit from this whatever it is, some fruit tree that grew up fruit outside, and drank water from a well. But except for that, he had no contact with the world whatsoever, and even that there was no real contact. Right? He was just ate and ate and he drank from. So he was in this cave for 12 years, 13 years, and he didn't do any commandments. Right? Didn't do any of the commandments, didn't sit a lulav and esrog. So he said he did it by means of thought. Something like that also was the early, it says the Hasidim, that their prayer was so intense and their connection to God was so intense that the little bit that they did do in the world, it had tremendous blessing in it. That's what Leah thought. That sure, of course, you have to have deed, but she thought she would be the main thing. Leah is the inner connection, deep thought about God, and that she would, the people would, that would be the main connection of the Jewish people to God, and a little bit they would do action, deeds. But Yaakov knew that you can't do this. Leah, only special high people are able to, and they're very, very few. I will call Yisrael, but majority of the Jewish people, they can't spend their time thinking about and clinging to God and hoping that there'll be a blessing in every physical thing that they do. It won't work that way. The main occupation of the majority of Jews is doing Torah and saying the words of Torah. I'm sorry, doing commandments and saying the words of Torah, Dibur and Maisa, speech and action. Look, and therefore, Rochel, therefore, Yaakov, he put his bed in the tent of Rachel. She was the main one. This is speech and action. But nevertheless, there has to be also thought that there, this is, from this comes Ria and Shmiya, comes seeing and hearing, the stakal b'yakara, the malka. Thought means that you're able to think about God, seeing God, hearing God. That's all the tribes that we're going to talk about. Reuven, Shimon. Reuven is seeing God. Shimon is hearing, understanding God. And they all came from Leah. A person that says all I have is learning Torah and doing the commandments, he hasn't even got the Torah and the commandments because his intention is not to God. So therefore, there has to be both. Rotza v'shovitz is going to God and coming back into the world to do the commandments. He notes techilas so why? Because the main revelation of God and the main intention of God in creating the world is in the end. The end is inserted in the beginning. So we have to have both. Very good. Now let us do another mimer. Another mimer. Here we go. Let's maybe turn this one off. Stop share temporarily. 1 minute. Let's even stop the recording temporarily.